Today was day 271 of the second Trump administration. Right now, we are mere hours away from Saturday's No Kings rallies in cities and towns across the country. Organizers are expecting a massive turnout to protest the president's agenda and policies. Meanwhile, many Republicans have cast those very same rallies as anti-American and even tried to tie them to the ongoing government shutdown. Speaking of which, this was day 17 of that shutdown, and Speaker Mike Johnson announced he'll continue to keep the House out of session all next week as well. The last time they were in session, for those keeping track, was 28 days ago, September 19th. Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is not happy.
House Republicans are nowhere to be found. Literally have been on vacation for 3 consecutive weeks, have canceled votes for 3 consecutive weeks. They are in the Legislative Witness Protection Program. No one can find them here in the Capitol, and no one can find them in their districts.
Over at the White House, Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought continued to use the shutdown to slash funding, posting that the Army Corps of Engineers was immediately pausing more than $11 billion for so-called lower priority projects in New York, San Francisco, Boston, and Baltimore, which all happen to be blue cities in blue states. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. So, Luke, I want to start with you and tomorrow's No Kings rallies. Tons of Republicans are calling this the Hate America rallies. This is so much more heated than what they've said about previous protests, and I'm wondering what you make of that escalating rhetoric.
Well, it shows the protests are hitting a nerve, right? These protests are expected to be extremely large. The last No Kings protests were also very large. They garnered a lot of attention. They gave Democrats and progressives and people on the left a real boost of energy. You know, for a lot of progressive people living in this country right now, it feels extremely oppressive. And they don't control any levers of government. They don't have the presidency. They don't have the Supreme Court. They don't have the either branch of the Congress. And so this is sort of a chance to finally stand up and show we're here. We don't like the way you're running the country, and we're doing something about it. And I think people are taking notice. And you know, President Trump's approval ratings aren't particularly great right now. He has trouble getting above 40%, and so it's showing a lot of the country is standing up against his agenda.
So Hayes, Trump told Fox News that he is not a king. It kind of reminds me of those T-shirts that my not a king T-shirt leaves people asking a lot of questions, or whatever the expression is. Trump himself, of course, did muse about becoming dictator for a day. He has also said that his supporters, maybe they don't need to vote again if he were reelected. And in February, the White House even posted this image reading, "Long live the king." So, like, definitely not a king, right?
Super not a king.
Super not a king.
The amount of unkingliness emanating from this White House is truly stunning. I think that Trump does understand that being called a king in America is bad. He understands that part, at least. The problem that he faces is that he wants to be. Like, he wants to have all the powers of kingship. He wants to have the sort of autocratic, my way or the highway, what I say goes, about how to run the country. He wants to be able to throw people in the dungeon for disagreeing with him. He wants to be able to loot the treasury as though it were his personal treasury and dole out cash without Congress's approval. He is, if he is not a king, then I feel like he is at the very least emulating Bad King John, who gave us the Magna Carta all those hundreds of years ago. I think that he is someone
we're getting some really deep historical cuts here.
It's Friday night. We're getting deep cuts.
Yeah.
And I really think that he knows that to be called a king is bad, but he is not willing to not act like he wishes to be king.
Okay, fair enough. So, Nayara, what do you make of how the White House and Republicans on the Hill are trying to characterize not just these protests tomorrow, but basically all opposition?
I find it hilarious that he's saying not a king, because it reminds me of Richard Nixon saying not a crook, right? So the more you repeat the negative, the more you think, okay, so you actually do want to be a king. And in that similar vein, that idea of suspending rule of law, of directly requesting the Supreme Court to help him militarize a variety of American cities, calling your opposition the enemy and demonizing them. I mean, the fundamental right to peaceful protest, something that we have cherished in this country for generations, suddenly is now something that we should be decrying and we should be abstaining from. It's add this to the desire that Trump has for military parades, and it all ties up into a package of, okay, maybe not a king, but maybe a dictator general of sorts. So it's a mixed message about what Trump wants to be, but it's certainly not a pro-democracy, pro-constitution message.
So Hayes Naira mentioned just now the military parade and some other extravagant things that Trump has spent money on. You've actually written something recently about how he has used some creative accounting to continue spending money on his own priorities, even as the government is shut down. Can you explain how he is doing that and why I believe you think it is illegal?
So because OMB Director Russell Vought, who for all of his faults is very good at what he does. And what he's doing right now is trying to make sure that even in the midst of a shutdown, when there is technically no money, he is looking for places within the federal government that have pockets of cash still and saying, we'll just use this. The problem there is that in many of these cases, that's not technically allowed. For example, military officials getting their paychecks this week, that was done by raiding the research and development funds at the Pentagon, which there are ways you can do that. Pete Hegseth does have powers to do that under the law, but it's capped at a certain amount. And there are certain guidelines to what you have to do to make that happen. More troubling, I think, is the fact that in the White House this week, we had FBI Director Kash Patel saying Trump found money for special agents to get paid. No explanation where that money came from.
Like in the couch cushion somewhere,
Absolutely.
Probably,
Just enough to fund 1,800 special agents or something is what Patel said. But then you have more confusing things like giving WIC money from pulling money from tariff revenue to put into WIC,
which is nutritional assistance for poor
newborn
women
mothers,
and new moms. Yep,
where
new moms and kids.
Technically that might be allowed, but it's a very novel use of it. But a court might say this is illegal. The problem is you have to have someone who's willing to go to court and say, please don't give money to poor mothers and infants. Please don't give money to the military. And the White House is betting that the optics of that are bad enough that they'll just be able to skate by.
Right. Who wants to be on the side of keep the money away from the poor moms and babies? I get that.
Catherine, here's where I wonder, though. I really struggle with this idea of $20 billion going to Argentina while we have a government shutdown and are arguing about basic health care to the United States, right? The idea of that, I mean, even in the optics that Trump works with, sometimes he gets a little sideways with himself. Like we're talking about the CIA doing operations in Venezuela and the bombing of ships off of another country. Sure, like this is 1980s era U.S. military intervention in Latin America, and it completely goes against any idea of what his MAGA base is supported. But again, back to the $20 billion that somehow can go to another country while we can't even open our government and provide healthcare subsidies.
Yeah, even Marjorie Taylor Greene has complained that this is not America first. And I don't know, maybe she's trying to out MAGA, the king of MAGA. Luke, where are lawmakers in all of this? We heard Hakeem Jeffries complaining that they're all on vacation. What are they actually doing? Because my understanding is they're still not really doing town halls. They're not in Washington legislating. So are they all in Cabo? Like, what are they doing right now as the president is seizing power of the purse?
Yeah, there's record streaming of Netflix right now in congressional districts across the country. Speaker Johnson says they're working hard in their home districts, but really the strategy here is he wants to keep them out of Washington. He wants to be the central messenger on the shutdown. You get enough Republicans on the Hill, they start talking, they're interacting. They might say some stupid things. They might throw the message off. Perhaps even worse to the speaker's agenda, they could start cutting deals with Democrats on health care, and then the whole plan will be thrown out. So he believes it's in his interest to keep his rank and file out of D.C. I'm not sure how sustainable that is. I think people are getting restless. I think it maybe isn't the best optics for the Democrats all to be there in the House ready to work while there's only this one, young Republican there sitting in his office looking lonely. So in terms of messaging, it's a messaging strategy, but you can see that it could easily backfire. By physically not being there, they're sending the message that they're not engaged in the act of governing.
Hayes, as Luke just mentioned, there is this fight over healthcare, which we're going to talk about much more in depth later on the show. Democrats have also floated another demand, which is that Trump needs to reverse or pause his mass firings. And for those who are watching now, Trump and Russell Vought have used this opportunity to lay off tons and tons of workers at the CDC and elsewhere, some of whom have been recalled, but most of whom have not. Is it wise for Democrats to pivot to that demand, however reasonable it might be, given that it kind of complicates their messaging in this fight?
I think that they're right to call out the firings as cruel, as potentially illegal, but I don't think that this is the right time for them to make it a demand for reopening the government, to make it formally part of their negotiating strategy. I think that there are several Democrats feel like the lawsuits that are going on in places like California, where a federal judge put a block on the firings. I think it's fair for them to let that play out in court. I think it's fair to make that part of their messaging, that Trump is using this to further punish hardworking federal workers and to the detriment of the American people. But I don't think that shifting the focus fully away from healthcare, not when premiums are about to go up, really makes sense as they're trying to keep their leverage in this shutdown fight going.
Luke, I want to switch topics temporarily. So there's this battle between Chicago and the administration over federal troops. Today, Trump asked the Supreme Court to allow him to send in the National Guard. What do you think it means that Trump is going this far to make that happen? And how is all of this being received by Republican voters who historically have been kind of skeptical of federal tyranny? That's not my word. That's a word I heard a lot during the Obama administration, to be clear.
Yeah, I mean, so look, past presidents have had the power to send in the guard during real emergencies, right? That's something that presidents sometimes do. But the different thing about what Trump is doing is there's no base of facts to cause the guard to go in. There's not a riot going on. There's not a hurricane. It's literally he's looking around the country to pick fights in order to show his maximalist approach to government and send in troops and put them on streets of cities where the governor or mayor doesn't want them there. And so what he's done is he's used powers that he may have if he looks through old laws and finds ways to do it. But the facts aren't there to support the way he's using these laws. And so you're seeing lots of courts stand up and say, well, actually, that wasn't, there weren't actually the facts to support the guard in this situation. And so Trump here is going directly to the court that he thinks is most likely to side with him, given that he has appointees on it and it's Republican majority, and that's the Supreme Court.
The global humiliation. There was a time when the world looked at the U.S. and saw stability. Then Trump walked in and turned the briefing room into a circus tent. I remember watching foreign leaders try to hide their disbelief behind polite smiles, the kind you give to a man who thinks the room laughs with him. Every handshake, every summit, every historic deal was all theater. He didn't listen to advisors, he listened to applause. And when the world didn't clap, he took it personally. That's the thing about Trump. Every disagreement feels like betrayal. Every bit of advice sounds like disrespect. He thought leadership meant dominance. He thought diplomacy was a weakness. And in the end, he left the world not fearing America, but pitying it. Allies stopped calling. Enemies stopped pretending. And Trump, he called it victory. He said America was respected again. But respect isn't built on fear, it's built on trust. And nobody trusts a man who treats every friendship like a deal and every deal like a tweet. The world didn't move on because it hated Trump. It moved on because it couldn't afford to wait for him. In the end, Trump will boast that he changed the world. And maybe, in a way, he did, just not how he imagined. He made other nations realize they could survive without America's permission. He made old allies rethink old loyalties. And he made history remember that ego can collapse empires faster than any war. The world didn't stop spinning when Trump withdrew. It started recalibrating. New centers of power emerged. New voices filled the silence he left behind. One day, when future historians write about the fall of American dominance, they'll trace it back to the man who thought the world was a mirror and never noticed when it stopped reflecting him.